I still remember that autumn evening as if it were etched into my soul, a time when the line between the living and the dead blurred into something unspeakably monstrous. I had always been drawn to the woods, enchanted by their timeless secrets, but I never expected that curiosity would lead me to awaken a horror lurking beneath the earth. I was an amateur archaeologist of sorts, or at least that's how I like to think of myself, a seeker of forgotten truths buried in the depths of time and nature. The locals in the nearby village had long whispered warnings about the ancient, gnarled forest that sprawled beyond the farthest ridge. "Don't dig in the woods," they'd say in hushed tones, as if invoking an incantation meant to ward off dark spirits. Their warnings, however, ignited a fierce defiance in me. I believed I could tame whatever secrets lay hidden there, convinced that a rational explanation lurked behind every myth. It all began with a seemingly innocuous rumor, a tale of an unmarked grave, or so it was said, deep in the forest. My interest was piqued by the prospect of uncovering relics of the past, the remains of a long-forgotten life. Armed with shovels, flashlights, and the insatiable hunger for discovery, I set out at dusk, eager to confront the forest's enigmatic heart. The cool, damp air and the rustle of ancient leaves whispered promises of revelations. I had no inkling of the nightmare that awaited me. As I ventured deeper into the forest, the trees grew denser, their gnarled branches intertwining overhead to form a suffocating canopy that blotted out the last vestiges of sunlight. The path was scarcely visible, overtaken by wild underbrush and tangled roots. A sense of foreboding gnawed at my mind, yet I pressed on, driven by a force I could neither explain nor resist. After hours of labor, I stumbled upon a clearing that seemed almost untouched by time. In the center, half hidden by a thick veil of moss and decaying foliage, lay what appeared to be a shallow grave. The soil was unnaturally disturbed, a perfect circle of churned dirt that begged to be examined. The atmosphere was heavy with silence, a silence so profound it swallowed even the sound of my own heartbeat. I knelt by the disturbed earth and with trembling hands began to excavate. The act of digging was both cathartic and horrifying. Each shovelful of soil uncovered more of what I initially presumed were the remnants of a human burial. My flashlight beam danced over skeletal fragments, darkened by time and decay. But as I cleared away the layers, a startling realization struck me. This was no ordinary burial site. The bones were warped, twisted into grotesque shapes, and there were signs of something else, something that defied the natural order. At first, I believed the remains to be those of a long-dead villager, perhaps someone ostracized or sacrificed in some forgotten ritual. I recalled whispers among the locals of a man without a face, a being whose lack of features was said to be a curse. But as I continued to excavate, the pit beneath the earth seemed to pulsate with a dreadful, almost sentient energy. It was as if the ground itself had become a living entity, harboring an ancient secret best left undisturbed. Without warning, the earth trembled. A sudden, violent shudder rippled through the clearing, sending shards of rock and dirt flying in every direction. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding in terror, as the ground heaved open like the maw of a beast awakened from a deep slumber. In that churning fissure, I saw something that defied all reason. A pair of glistening, malevolent eyes staring back at me from the darkness below. They were alive, pulsing with a feral hunger that spoke of ancient malice. Before I could react, a massive claw erupted from the earth, its jagged edges scraping against tree bark and igniting sparks as it tore through my surroundings. The claw was enormous, reminiscent of a primordial creature's talon, and it slashed through the air with the sound of grinding stone and snapping branches. Panic surged through me, and I ran, blindly, desperately, through the labyrinthine forest. But the forest was no longer an ally. It had become a hunting ground, every shadow concealing unspeakable dangers. Behind me, the earth split open further, and the beast began to emerge. It was a sight of indescribable horror, a colossal, twisted abomination that seemed to be part man, part creature of nightmare. Its body was contorted, a patchwork of decaying flesh and sinewy muscle, animated by a sinister, otherworldly life. Its face, or what should have been its face, was a blank canvas of flesh, devoid of any recognizable features. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just an expanse of pallid, sickly skin that radiated a presence of pure malevolence. I staggered backward, unable to comprehend the abomination that lurked before me. I had believed it was once human, a victim of some cruel ritual or punishment. Instead, I realized with a paralyzing dread that the beast was something altogether different, a hideous remnant of a forgotten era, reanimated by forces beyond human understanding. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but terror rooted me to the spot as the creature advanced with an eerie, deliberate grace. It moved with unnatural fluidity, its limbs bending in ways that defied the laws of nature. With each step, it left behind scorched earth, as if its very presence burned the life out of the land. Flames licked at its form, not consuming it, but rather accentuating its nightmarish contours. The beast's claws, sharp as razors, glinted in the half-light, and I could hear the guttural sound of its breathing, a sound that reverberated through the silent forest like the tolling of a death knell. My mind raced with desperate thoughts. How could I escape this nightmare? How could I possibly fight something that was not entirely of this world? Before I could muster an answer, the beast lunged. In one fluid, horrifying motion, it pounced upon me with a force that seemed to shatter the very fabric of reality. I felt its claws tear through my clothing and scrape at my flesh, each strike a searing pain that spread like wildfire through my body. I fought back, flailing in a desperate, instinctual bid for survival, but the creature's strength was overwhelming. It pinned me against the rough bark of an ancient oak, its burning eyes locked onto mine. In that moment, I could see the world through its void, a mirror of my own terror and despair. The forest around us faded into insignificance, leaving only the two of us in a nightmarish tableau of impending doom. As the beast's claws closed in, I felt a sudden burst of heat, a blaze that illuminated the darkness and forced the creature to recoil. Fire, inexplicably, erupted from the ground, as if the very earth sought to purge itself of this unholy intrusion. The flames danced wildly, consuming everything in their path, and for a fleeting moment, I believed I might be saved. But the fire was merciless, an elemental force that did not distinguish between hunter and prey. The beast hissed and shrieked, its form contorting in agony as the fire licked at its hide. Yet, even as it writhed in pain, its eyes burned with a relentless, almost supernatural fury. With a final defiant roar, it surged forward once more, its claws slashing at the encroaching flames as if to snatch them away from the heavens. The air crackled with the sound of burning wood and the beast's furious growls, creating a symphony of terror that echoed deep into the heart of the forest. In that hellish moment, as I lay writhing in pain and terror, I realized that the forest was not merely a backdrop to this horror. It was an active participant. The woods had absorbed the anguish of countless souls, its soil saturated with blood and secrets. The beast, an ancient guardian of these primordial truths, had been roused from its slumber by my transgression, a living embodiment of the curses that had been whispered through generations. Struggling against the searing pain, I managed to free one hand, fumbling for the small pocket knife I always carried for emergencies. The knife, though insignificant in the face of such overwhelming horror, was my only hope, a fragile talisman of human resolve against the encroaching darkness. With trembling fingers, I clutched the blade and, in a desperate bid for survival, lunged at the beast's formless face. The creature recoiled, its expressionless visage contorting into something akin to surprise. For a brief instant, I saw a flicker of recognition in its void, a hint that beneath its monstrous exterior, there might once have been a spark of human identity, now all but extinguished. But that moment of hesitation was fleeting. The beast recovered with terrifying speed, its claws wrapping around my wrist with the cold, unyielding grip of death. I screamed, a sound that was swallowed by the inferno and the cacophony of the forest, but my cries were lost amidst the chaos of burning leaves and cracking branches. In those final moments, as the creature's grip tightened and the fire closed in around us, I was overwhelmed by the stark realization that I had trespassed into realms beyond mortal comprehension. I had disturbed forces that were ancient and unforgiving, forces that demanded sacrifice in exchange for their terrible gifts. The forest, in its quiet, indifferent majesty, reclaimed what was rightfully its own. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was the beast's clawed hand raised high, poised to deliver the final, brutal blow, a savage punctuation mark to a life defined by hubris and unbridled curiosity. And as my consciousness faded, I could only think, in a silent, futile prayer, that maybe now the forest would find peace once again. Some say that on moonless nights, if you venture into that cursed wood, you can still hear the echoes of my desperate screams mingling with the beast's unearthly howls. Others claim that the ground still trembles beneath your feet, as if the earth itself remembers the day a forbidden secret was unearthed. And if you dare to look closely at the charred remains of the clearing, you might find a single, forlorn scrap of cloth, a remnant of my failed defiance. A grim memento of the day I learned that some secrets are best left undisturbed. I warn you then, dear reader, heed the cautionary whispers of those who have lived long enough to know the truth. The woods are alive with unspeakable terrors, guardians of ancient curses that defy mortal ken. And should you ever be tempted to unearth what lies beneath, remember my fate. For in that dark, haunted forest, you might awaken something that has waited, unyielding and eternal, beneath the cold, indifferent soil. They told me not to dig in the woods, and I found something alive, a brutal beast of fire and claw, a grotesque guardian of secrets too terrible for human hearts to fathom. And now, even in death, I remain a cautionary whisper on the wind, a silent warning to all who dare disturb the ancient, unholy slumber of the earth.